Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Amos Elad. I'm the Vice President for Development and Public Affairs in Tel Aviv University, and welcome to our webinar series. We're very proud today to do another one, and again, always we say in this crazy world, and we're talking about today about some issues that are very, very important to many of us, and maybe majority of us. For Tel Aviv University, it's important really to make this effort to really connect to all our friends and partners around the world. As you know, we're having those at least once a week, and we are really, really appreciative that all of you are joining us. We have people from around the world, really, from if it's China and Australia that are still keeping awake, and of course the rest of the world. And this is very important for us at Tel Aviv University to have you with us. As you know, Tel Aviv University is working so hard on the corona issue. We have over 120 researchers who are working day and night. If it's in the area of our friends here that are going to talk today on psychology or other issues, and of course in the laboratories trying to find vaccine and solutions for tests. But today we're speaking on a very important topic, and I'm very proud to present the moderator, Professor Ginzburg, who will be leading this panel with our friends, Professor Haim, and Professor Cinamon is joining us soon. And I will give the floor to Professor Ginzburg to start this panel, and I look forward to see you in real life person in Tel Aviv soon, and if not in some other place in the world. So thank you very much, everyone. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Amos, for this introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm very delighted and honored to take part and moderate this web session. I'd like to welcome all the many attendees. I can see we have almost 120 by now, for being with us today in this interesting webinar, in which we will focus on the ways that people adjust to rapidly changing reality, which is imposed by the corona crisis. So, talking about sanity and madness, it's unclear what is sane and what is insane during such days. Usually when someone avoids crowded places, keeps social distancing from others, stays at home, so usually we will think that this may be some signs of agoraphobia or social anxiety. When someone is engaged in the frequent thorough hand washing, then we will think that maybe this is kind of OCD or something. But these behaviors, among others, are now considered as rational and desired behaviors. And unfortunately, we have no idea for how long, but it seems that we may stick with them for another unknown period of time. So it's clear that sanity is a relative concept, and things that seem to be maladaptive in signs of distress in one context may be functional in another. Traditionally, mental health professionals tend to focus on the pathological and maladaptive and maladjustment, and we tend to overlook functionality and resiliency. For many years, clinicians and researchers focused their attention on individuals who demonstrate some difficulties in adjustment to uncertainties and to stressful situations like the one that we are facing now. Thus, it's not surprising that we have like 50 shades of distress, but quite a vague and general understanding of what it is well adjustment and what is resiliency. But for the past 2 decades or so, research has brought into our mind the very fundamental observation that, in fact, most individuals tend to adjust to such situations, and most individuals manage to cope and demonstrate flexibility when they are confronting the need to change their habits and behaviors in a manner that would enable them to regain their sense of safety and well-being. And moreover, some individuals are even find such situations as an opportunity for gaining insights about themselves, about others, and they develop some sense of empowerment and growth. So we're now in the middle of ongoing crisis, and we have no idea when it will end and in what way it will end. But another important thing that research has taught us is that not only that there is diversity in individuals' reaction during stressful situations, but also there is a variance in their trajectories of adaptation over time. So manifestations of distress during the immediate or during the event or immediately after its ending may be a risk for long-term distress, but sometimes for some people we know that there are some people that show signs of severe distress at the beginning will recover spontaneously later. And other people we know may demonstrate delayed reactions, meaning at the beginning they will show us coping and functionality, but as times go and the end the event is ending, then we'll see some signs of distress. So in today's seminar, we'll try to look at the wide spectrum of individuals' reactions to the current corona crisis. And we look at both the toll that individual may pay, but also on the strength and the resilience that may emerge. And we will consider these reactions both in the short and the long term. And for these issues, we have here tonight two leading researchers from Tel Aviv University, and I will present them very briefly. Professor Yair Haim is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Tel Aviv University. He's the director of the Center for Development and Psychopathology and the Center for Traumatic Stress and Resilience. Professor Haim is the president-elect of the Association for Cognitive Bias Modification. His research focuses on emotional, cognitive, neural, and genetic mechanisms underlying anxiety and stress-related disorders. His primary effort is on translation of basic science into effective evidence-supported therapies and prevention programs. Professor Haim's intervention protocols for children and adults, developed in close collaboration with the National Institute of Health, the NIH, the US Department of Defense, and the Israel Defense Force. And these interventions are now implemented in hundreds of clinical and research sites around the globe. His prevention protocols are applied in the Israel Defense Force and tested by the US Army and the Australian Defense Force. And Professor Haim will talk today about resilience and psychopathology in the face of adversity. Professor Gali Cinamon, which just joined us, hi Gali, is a professor of education of Tel Aviv University, and she's the head of the Career Development Lab and the head of School of Education. Her research interests focus on career development of women, minorities, and at-risk populations, work-family relations through the lifespan, future plans, and career education. Her research group involves with several university community partnerships that focus on career interventions in high schools and in the civic organizations. She developed a special career intervention model that is currently implemented in all young adults centers in Israel and in the Israeli program for young adults. Her vision is to expand and enhance career education and career guidance services in Israeli schools, academia, youth services, and community centers. Her work is driven by her deep commitment to human development and by her belief that it is society's responsibility to promote individuals' health, well-being, and meaningful life. She's a mother of 3 children, she's a spouse, a friend, and a long-distance runner. And Professor Cinamon will talk today about the work and family in age of corona. So I'll present the panelists a few questions, and the audience is also invited to raise queries or ideas in related issues. For this, please use the icon of the Q&A, which is on the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to relate to your comments later. So I'd like to begin with asking the panelists to present their ideas about sanity in the current context. How would you define sanity during this period? Gali, would you begin?
Hi everybody, shalom, good to be here. Since I just joined, I need more breath because I had some technical problems. You know what, I will jump immediately. you sent me the question before, so I had time to think about it. And I would choose 3 issues that I find them extremely important in general, and these days in particular. The first one is to be able to love. Even in these days, to love yourself, to love other, family, friends, humanity. This stressful time stimulate many fears, and these fears connecting with other bad feelings and behavior of hating others or avoiding others. And I think the most, it will sound familiar to you, to be able to love. The second issue is work. I think those who can work these days are very strong people. But I define work more broadly than general. Work is not just when you earn money. Work is, I mean, also in work, the work of caring, to take care. It's work. To be volunteer, to be active participant, to make meals to family members, to take care of our older family members is work. And the third point that I would like to raise, if you are able to use humor in order to be critical thinker about the explanation, the political explanation that experts like us and others are giving to you. Those who can keep on these 3 points that I just mentioned, that are still able to create and sustain and keep and develop love and deep, meaningful relationship with others. Those who can work in various type of work, not just work that bring money, work that making a better society, and those who can create, use humor in order to be a critical thinker, critical discussant, critical citizens, I think are very strong people that can keep healthy and safe during these days.
Well, thank you, Gali, for this humanistic perspective. Yair, what is your take on this, on sanity during these days?
Well, you know, you can look at it from the other side of the coin about resilience. You know, life summons all sorts of difficult situations that we need to deal with. And the good news is that most people are highly resilient to even the worst situations. So my prediction is that although we are now dealing with a very difficult situation that is both stressful and could lead to heightened anxiety and depression, still most people, and when I say most people, you know, I can even risk it and give you a number. I think 90% of the people, at least, will be able to handle the situation. And even though difficulties will present themselves and some mental difficulties will also be present, still most of us are going to fare well enough when it's done and done with. So this is one set of news that people need to know. But I think also that a large number of people will have ramifications of being alone. And loneliness and being alone, I think, is the key point here for psychopathology down the road. One of the main or primary mechanisms that we use in times of distress is to socially approach other people for help, for emotional support, and this is a primary way to deal with it. that is now curtailed to a certain extent. Not completely, because we still can communicate through other means. And sometimes we have our loved ones or close family with us, but many people will have to deal with loneliness and not having this very important moderator of stress. This is where we might see elevations in psychopathology and difficulties to deal with in the future. Now, I also agree with Karni that a lot of behaviors that we would consider abnormal in everyday life, in regular times, become normative, if you like. If you had OCD and you were washing your hands all the time, you've been cured, you know, these Corona times. But I think what's really important is societal cohesion, some sort of a way to communicate. So in a way, I think Gali points to elements that enhance this this type of feeling or behavior. So is this enough for now? Karni?
Yeah, for now. But I want to keep asking you something. You talked about the stressful. One of the most stressful elements of this period is the isolation. But I want to ask you whether you can refer to there's also an element of fear, basic fear. People are fearing that they may be infected. People may have all sorts of health anxieties. Can you elaborate a little bit about these?
Yeah, I would like to make a distinction between fear and anxiety, which I think is an important distinction that psychologists at least use, psychologists and psychiatrists. Fear is something that that is a fear of a realistic threat. So I don't know if you are worried from a stranger that is coming your way with a gun. This is fear. This is realistic. It's completely natural reaction, adaptive reaction. Anxiety, on the other hand, is an excessive fear where the reason for being afraid is not clear. Now, if you think about the coronavirus, fear should be a very normative response. You should be afraid, but there's nothing that you actually see. The threat is not visible, and people are not sure now whether this reaction is excessive, being in the anxiety realm, or is it actual fear that is supporting adaptive behavior. And I think it's been a very difficult situation for the authorities also to try and convince people that they should be fearful of being infected, that it's a real danger, when they don't see it, and some of the people actually see it as an anxious behavior because the actual threat is not visible and it's not tangible or not easily tangible. And so this is one thing. The other thing is that we do see, so we're studying this phenomenon at the moment, and we do see an elevation in anxiety that's related to corona issues. So, for instance, being infected, or a loved one being infected, or what are the consequences of being ill with corona and the suffering that goes with it. And we see we're monitoring this over time, and we do see an elevation, and it also corresponds to how the media portrays the situation. So there are fluctuations in the levels of anxiety or fear that people experience. So the question is when this becomes something that you want to treat, so that you actually think that the anxiety is excessive and is not functional. And it turns out that for some people, anxiety really is causing dysfunction, and it's too strong, it's too excessive. And maybe later I can tell you about a treatment program that we are now testing in Israel, how to treat excessive anxiety that's related to corona issues.
Yeah, I would like to hear about this. But before, just one question. You talked about excessive anxiety. Can you give us some examples of how it looks, these excessive anxieties, and what may be its later consequences of such anxiety, as the one that you define as excessive and the one that you define as something that would better be treated?
Right. So you could think of there are two major types of anxieties that currently afflict people in relation to the corona crisis. One is health anxiety. This is a whole branch of anxieties that are well documented, even in regular days. There are people who are excessively worried about their health and are worried about contracting all sorts of different illnesses. And the other has to do with economic situations and economic problem that maybe Gali will discuss later. We focus on health anxiety, and health anxiety is defined excessive when there is no evidence that or the proportion between the level of anxiety and its symptoms is too strong relative to the actual threat. Now, if you are at home and you've been at home for the past 5 weeks and you're not seeing anyone on the outside, but still you are really, really worried and concerned that you will contract the coronavirus, or that someone within your family who are also not going out of the house will contract the coronavirus, or if you are now monitoring yourself, monitoring your symptoms. So now it's illegal to cough, right? Almost illegal. But people cough all the time. You notice this? They sneeze and they cough but usually you don't pay attention to it, or you just cough and you move on, right? So now I would define excessive if every little sign in yourself of coughing is now being interpreted as, oh my God, now I have the coronavirus. And most people who actually are sick with the coronavirus, they have very minor symptoms, right? So now it becomes a question of the balance between worry and interpreting your own symptoms and looking for symptoms in your family, in your close, in the people who are close to you. This is how we define excessive. When it's no longer keeping a balance between something that's functional and reasonable, and now creates many, many hours of undue worry. So when it comes to this point, people find it also hard to function because most of their capacities are turned into this worry and monitoring. These are the people we want to treat because they suffer, and B, it prevents them from adjusting to new moves or to changes. So if it's now okay to get out of the house and do some sports at a radius of whatever, 100 meters or 500 meters, they will not use it because they are worried. So these are the people we're now trying to treat. And now the problems now is how do you devise a treatment that could be delivered to people who are at home. And so we devised treatment like that for other purposes in our research, and we tested it quite extensively. And what we've done now is we changed its purpose to deal with health concerns or health anxiety issues. So we advertised maybe a week ago that we're gonna try and do this remote treatment. We immediately were bombarded with more calls than we were able to handle. But we decided to test 20 consecutive cases in an open trial to see whether it were effective at all. And we are now completing patient 19, and patient 20 is already running. And in this open trial, we see quite dramatic reductions in symptoms for the people who receive the treatment. So this for us is a preliminary phase. You know, if you are actually able to provide this kind of treatment to many people at the same time remotely. And the answer at the moment is yes, we are able to handle it, not in the hundreds that approach, but in the tens that we can handle. And symptom reduction is significant and also quite impressive. So you never know if it's a placebo effect and people get some attention and they get better, but this is also good at the moment. So before we move into full clinical trials, we already have something that seemed to work. So our next step would be to release it to the population at large while we keep on testing the efficacy in more rigorous manners.
Well, thank you, Yair. This is very encouraging, and it seems like very promising line of work. I'd like to ask you, Gali, your research, as I presented before, you're studying work-family relations, and I think that this time is specifically interesting with regards to these issues. So can you please refer to work-family relations or conflicts during the Corona crisis?
Okay, yes. We are focusing on the work-family interface in general, in different stages of life, and especially in times of stress. And when we are talking about work-family interface or work-family relations, we are talking about mutual crossover or spillover of thoughts, emotions, skills, and connections from one domain, family, to the other domain, work, and vice versa. And this crossover of spillover of thoughts, emotions, skills, knowledge, and connection between the domain can create at least two types of main relations. One is when they are conflictual, when our thoughts, time and energy and connection are all focused on one role and preventing us from doing the other role. Then when we talk about the work-family relation, we are talking about conflict relations. And the accumulative knowledge that we have in these very intensive investigated area is that when people suffer from conflict relation, there are very, very bad effects on the psychological health, on the vocational health behavior, on family relations, and on the individual life satisfaction and work satisfaction, which means we should avoid conflict relation. At the same time, if we are able to enhance our performance in both roles by taking from one role to the other role the good emotions, skills, knowledge, and attitudes, then we experience enrichment relations. We experience enhancement relationship. And you can assume that when an individual feels high levels of positive relation between the domain, then his behavior at home and at work is better, and his family life is much better, he's more satisfied, and also his vocational behavior is much better. This topic is very important since the majority of working adults around the world reporting about high levels of conflict between the domain, and we can understand because the economic world is very demanding, is very competitive, is unsecure, and people invest a lot of their time and energy and have a lot of difficulties to manage work and family, the two major domains in our life, in a way that will can be characterized as balanced or enrichment for them. So this is we try to understand what stimulate, what encourage, what enable people to create more, to reduce conflict relation and to increase facilitation and enhancement relationship. And at the beginning, it looks like that the corona enabled people to have much better work-family interface since we started to work from home. It enables us more flexibility to manage. Our time is in our hand, and we can manage our home task and our family task in a way that can enrich each other. And here again, we have this distinction between those who can afford it and those who cannot afford it. Those who have small houses, many kids, 2 parents at home, and they have at the same time the parents that help the kids to be a distant learner via Zoom, and at the same time to make their own Zoom meetings, and to divide the household, the house task between the couples become very complicated because both of us at the same time have to be parents and workers, and the house is very small, and it's difficult, and we don't have enough computer. It's difficult to manage it. So we already can see that those who came from more high level, ISCS level, can afford balancing the work-family interface during this time. They find the flexibility very stimulating. They enjoy more family time. They enjoy work. They have time to go to other tasks in work that since they become the owner of their time, even at work, they find more time to manage issues at work that they find them very interesting for them. So some people, some privileged group of people we can see are enjoying from more enrichment relation between work and family during these Corona days, while those who are less fortunate with basic resources reported about higher levels of stress and conflict between the roles. So one of the issues that we are trying to develop is how we help couples to reconstruct division of labor at home in a way that might enable them to increase facilitation between the domains. Unfortunately, we find in our recent research that, and we know it from countries all over the world, that the division of labor at home is the main person who is responsible for the homework is the woman, even if she earned more than her husband. So if I earn more than my spouse, it's not a reason that I will do less, or we will divide the work in a way that enable both of us to enjoy both domains, both roles. So division of labor at home is a very important factor that might increase facilitation relation between the domains, and we can work on it. The second is, as the Yair mentioned before, social solidarity, social connection, social support is something extremely important in time of stress. There is something that people, you didn't say it, social support is something extremely important in order to manage stress in general, and the work-family stress in the work-family interface in particular. And the Corona days, this crisis ask us, invite us actually to rethink about the help we give. And I'm not talking about the general population. I'm starting with home, how we can give support to each other at home. And the last component of our intervention is the ability, I mentioned in my opening remark, is the ability to redefine or think critically on the way we behave in a certain position. Like, for example, if as a mother I define myself as a good mother, that I have to be always at home and bring always very tasty dinners, so it will be more difficult to combine being a working mother. But if I define mother as to be sensitive in a very critique times, oh, this definition enabled me more combinations. Who can allow himself to choose, to be free to define how to choose how to define the way he or she perceive roles? Those who have social, critical social thinking, awareness. And what we try to do in our intervention is we work with families, and we try to make a exploration processes. This is the process of when we create or construct our identity. We allow ourselves to look at the way we behave as a family, as individual in the family, to ask ourselves, is it have to be this way? Can we do it in a different way? Can we define our preferences and values in a way that enable us to live in a way of more enhancement and balance? And what we do, we start with the kids. We do it in career education. We start with the kids. And now in a big project that we are doing in Israel, we call it the family project of the transition to adulthood. We talk about these issues with parents and young adults at the same time. And the assumption is that it will be when we educate and we do this intervention with young adults, with adolescents, and with young adults within the family context, we increase our ability to create a better cohesion society.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I add another issue?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Please do.
One of the things that is relatively new is that the work-family interface was never investigated among unemployed people. Because we could say people who don't have work, they have no work-family interface, but actually work exists in people's life even if they don't have it. We think about the economic anxiety because we don't have work is in our houses. So what we started, it's an international project of investigating to infuse the work-family interface also to investigate it also in the life of unemployed people. And by doing this, we want to be very, to understand this important interface among very vulnerable group of people. According in Israel, it's more than 25%. And we want to do it now before the economic will start to arrange the numbers in a way that reduce the number of unemployed people and say everything is okay and we don't have to investigate them, understand them anymore. We came back to 10%, and there is a nice statistics way to don't count certain age, certain job seekers, and reduce the number of unemployed. And we want to say, no, work-family interface exists also while we are looking for a job or we don't have a job, and we need to learn about this interface, and we need to work not only with the unemployed people, we need to work with the family. Since vicarious unemployment, what happened to kids and adolescents when they look at the parents, the mother and father who are unemployed and are struggling and are feeling, living in economic anxiety, affect their own career development. And therefore, early career intervention are extremely important these days on this topic, from my perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Gali. It's very interesting. I'm having, there is a question from the audience. Sheila is asking you, Yair, how people with already existing psychosomatic conditions such as anxiety and neurosis can manage this time of corona crisis. The question is about, especially when they are far away from their home country, when they cannot use their regular physical physician contact. But I would like to ask you in general, what is your, how do you see this, whether this is a special risk factor in these days, and how can we help these people?
Right, so I think a pre-existing tendencies for anxiety, for instance, or depression usually exacerbate under stress. And this is a well-documented phenomenon, and I fully understand the question from this perspective. Now, there has been a call for mechanized type treatments that can also be delivered remotely. And this is a big issue that a crisis like we're facing now accelerates these processes. You know, I've been working for several years now with post-traumatic stress patients and the VA in Nebraska. Now, it turns out that in Nebraska, many of the veterans live in very remote places, and they would need to drive 7 hours to the nearest clinic where they can receive face-to-face psychotherapy or group psychotherapy. And this is not practical, right? If you want to do, say, once or twice a week treatments. So this is something that psychology and psychiatry has been dealing with for the past decade, trying to figure out ways to treat people with more mechanized methods, but also that could be highly disseminated through the internet or even in well-structured clinical setups, but still remotely. And this has been studied in my group for the past 20 years, I think. And the most advanced area for this is in clinical anxiety and anxiety disorders, just like we're seeing at the moment. Now, we never imagined the situation that people will be confined to their apartment or their home, or will be isolated somewhere very far away from home, or will not have access to regular healthcare systems. But now we see that it's very needed. So just to give you an idea, we created a program with the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda in the US. It's called the Tel Aviv University NIH Attention Bias Modification Initiative. And this is really a mechanized treatment for anxiety disorders that was tested in many clinical trials, was found relatively effective. It's not the best treatment that we have, but it's certainly one of the well-supported, evidence-supported treatments that are out there that could be delivered remotely. Now we're struggling because when we provide this treatment in the clinic, in the lab or at the NIH or at Tel Aviv University, it has relatively high efficacy in reducing symptoms of anxiety. But when we start trying to deliver it remotely, we lose efficacy. And there are now maybe 50 different groups, research groups in the world that are trying to figure out how not to lose this efficacy over the internet, or lose just as little as possible. And I believe that remote mental health provision will gain traction much faster now than in the past. It already have shown to be very effective for certain psychological disorders. Post-traumatic stress disorder is one of the leading areas where it's been tested, where people find it very difficult to leave the house even in regular days, and also for depression. So if I can just summarize my response, one, there are these types of treatments. Two, we know how to deliver them remotely. And three, we're still looking for a way to do it in large numbers, large quantities, and most effectively. I'll give one other example. The area that surrounds the Gaza Strip in Israel suffers from elevated levels of post-traumatic stress disorder, both in youth, in children, adolescents, and adults. And the count now says anywhere between 25 and 30% of this population of about 60,000 people suffers from clinical symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And their access to conventional therapy is not that great, even though people are really making big efforts to reach them. When rocket starts falling, they are locked down basically to their houses, and they cannot access treatment. So we set up the infrastructure for remote treatments for the Gaza Strip, which is run from Tel Aviv. We both use video conferencing techniques, but also other more mechanized techniques to deliver evidence-supported therapy. So this has been quite helpful. I think we treated several hundreds, and especially when the situation becomes more difficult. So how the world will look after the corona pandemic in terms of psychological treatment, I think that there will be much more from mechanized and remotely delivered therapies.
Well, thank you. So I understand that you believe that this Zoom invasion into our life is going to stay. So we're going to keep on experiencing technology-assisted therapies, like we're now experiencing all these Zoom classes, Zoom yoga, Zoom seder, Zoom meetings with friends and colleagues. Yeah. So I believe this is here to stay. I understand.
This is yes. So if it was like several highly scientific papers a year in the past, you will see now that it will become a mainstream type of treating. And also think, let's say you have your clinic based in wherever, Tel Aviv. So you can treat people from a radius of 10 kilometers around your house, whatever, 10 miles. People will make the effort to come to your clinic or whatever it is. But in reality, you could treat people that are now in New Zealand from Tel Aviv. So if you have an expert on an issue, the access could be created very easily. Now, I'm not looking for only for one-to-one experiences. It's not just the translation of, okay, we're doing psychotherapy, you see me, I see you, and we do business as usual, it's only via Zoom. I think the whole concept is going to change. People would want to train and get therapy to specific symptoms that are mechanized. So there may be a meeting with the professional explaining the procedure and providing the protocols, but most of the protocols will be able to be completed alone from home. This is when dissemination will be wide. That will not require a one-to-one contact, at least not all the time.
So yeah, well, seems like a very promising advancement. And one last question, Gali, to you: how do you think the work-family relations will be affected by the establishment of such technologies? What do you think?
I must say that my answer is very similar to Yair's. Answer, because we already adapted the work-family interface to the work-study interface among students, and in a collaboration with MIT, we already developed an algorithm that gives via avatar, gives students career guidance before entering the university, when they are considering, can I be a student and to work at the same time? Is it good? Is it bad? How to have a work-study enhancement and enrichment? How I can use my work to enrich my study and vice versa? And how can I reduce conflict? So based on the work-family interface theoretical model, we developed and tested a work-study model for students, and we translated it already to career counseling to students we did it in Tel Aviv, and the results were amazing. And as Yair just said, it's people can use it from all over the world. They don't have to come to Tel Aviv University. And it was sensitive enough. The algorithm is the first model we need, of course, to continue to develop, and we are still working on it. But we show first the applicability of the theoretical model, and second, we've already proved that the internet-based career counseling is effective and doing a good job. So in our career lab, we give also career guidance sessions via Zoom before the Zoom. And I believe that all the concept of career education can have a huge boost from the technology development. If schools will continue to use all these technological development and to introduce children in school and even in our university with many important issues and aspects that we don't have time, and it's not an expertise of the researchers to work with them, and we never thought it's important, we start to realize that it is our responsibility to prepare them for the transition from school to work, from university to work. And an excellent way is to use this type of intervention that we are developing. And I think it's very important for also, it is our responsibility to not just to give a degree or to be a great researcher or to be a great clinician or architect, but how to be a good citizen, family members, spouse, husband, parents, and how can I do it all? We can do something very easily if we invest enough to do the right models, of course. But as Yair said, I don't think it's or the technology or the old fashion. It's this. We can have it all.
Well, thank you very much. It seems like that flexibility is the key issue today. So our session is over, and we're still having so many questions that are left unanswered, and so many things that we could refer to. I'd like to thank the panelists for their inspiring thoughts. I'd like to thank the audience for being with us tonight and for your continuous support, which is very dear for us. I'd like to thank the Friends of Tel Aviv University that facilitated this webinar and provided us the opportunity to hear these interesting ideas. And you're all invited to participate in our next webinar, a special webinar in which we'll celebrate the Israel Independence Day with Fauda. In this webinar, we will host Lior Raz and Avi Isacharov, the creators of Fauda, which will take place on Sunday, April 26th at 7 p.m. our time. Good night, everybody. Take care and keep healthy and sane.